Λοιπόν, η επόμενη ανακοίνωσή μας είναι του εξαιρετικού νεότερου συναδέλφου, του Nebojša Stanković, Σέρβου συναδέλφου, ο οποίος θα μας μιλήσει με θέμα, είναι αρχιτέκτον και ιστορικός της τέχνης, είναι επίκουρος καθηγητής στο Πανεπιστημίου της Πρίστινα και θα μας μιλήσει με θέμα The Architecture of the Λιτή of the Prophet Ηλία Church in Θεσσαλονίκη, Αθωνικά and Κωνσταντινοπολίtan elements and their functional aspects. Please.
Thank you, Stavro. Kalimera στους όλους. Sorry for, my Greek is not that good, so I will read my paper in English, but I can understand Greek, so I welcome also questions at the end. Just a moment for my computer to start. Net closer. Okay. I apologize for my computer because the text is there. We need it. Venerable Fathers, esteemed colleagues, dear friends, before I begin my presentation, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me and having me my modest contribution part of this very important, scholarly, diverse, and profoundly engaging conference. Also, I want to confess before the present audience, which consists of great scholars of both Mount Athos and Thessaloniki, my unworthiness to talk about the Athonite architecture and timidity to discuss one of the Thessalonian churches. However, having experienced on many occasions their friendship and kindness, professionally and humanely alike, I dare and feel welcome to present this modest exploration. It has already been noted and widely accepted in the scholarship that the Church of Prophet Elijah in Thessaloniki shows features unusual for the city's church architecture, but shared with and distinctly characteristic of the architecture of monastic Catholica on Mount Athos. First of all, it has a crossing square naos, crowned with a centrally placed dome and expanded with two conches on the north and south. Furthermore, the uncommonly spacious 9-bayed narthex, a pair of chapels appended to the west corners of the naos, and another pair which probably served as tipicaria, flanking the sanctuary, are also additions found only in few Athonite churches, dating to the 14th century, i.e. the time when the Thessalonian church was built. An open, highly restored portico that envelops the narthex on northwest and south sides is the only part of the church that can be associated with the contemporary ecclesiastic architecture of the city, as best illustrated by the churches of St. Panteleimon, St. Catherine, and Holy Apostles. Today, I wish to focus on the narthex, typologically termed as Liti, and its upper floor in the form of a gallery. Through an examination of all architectural elements of these two parts of the church and discussion of their physical and functional aspects in comparison to some Athonite and Constantinopolitan churches, my aim is to better contextualize this interesting but still enigmatic monument of the late Byzantine Thessaloniki. But first, a few words on what we presently know about the church's history and its potential Byzantine identification. The name of the building during the Ottoman period was recorded as Seraylı or Saraylı Cami, as well as Seray Atik Cami and Eski Seray Cami. These appellations have been mistakenly understood as the corruption of the dedication to Aios Ilias. On the other hand, their reference to some ancient palace it was built upon or in proximity of led Yorgos Theocharidis to identify the church with the Catholicon of Nea Moni, the monastery dedicated to Theotokos and founded by Makarios Humnos in circa 1360. Such an interpretation was argumentatively questioned by Thanasis Papazotos, who saw the small number of monks at Nea Moni, set by the founder at 15, not in accordance with the surviving church, which is the largest late Byzantine church in the city. Based on the remnants of the iconographic program in the narthex and on the western facade, he proposed that the church was originally dedicated to Christ and consequently, and in the view of some other architectural features, notably the presence of gallery above the narthex, might have belonged to the imperially sponsored Akapniu monastery. In consideration of certain historical conditions and possibilities for an imperial involvement, Papazotos dated the church to the period between 1351 and 1369, and noted that this period coincides with the governing of the city being in hands of Empress Anna of Savoy, Paleologina, 1351 to 1365. Recently, Anastasios Stantzis connected the church's palatial background with the residence of Sirgis, which is the Byzantine rendering of Sirgi de Lusignan's name, highly contested property in the late Byzantine Thessaloniki, and the sponsorship of the same empress. On the grounds of the palace of Sirgis, she founded the monastery of the Anargiri, a female community where she also took her monastic vows as nun Anastasia, and which was later donated as a metochion to Nea Moni. Therefore, Tansis concludes that the church should be identified with the Catholicon of the Anargiri. Whatever the Byzantine identification of this monument might be, its composite and large-scale architecture, which is masterfully balanced, as well as fragmentarily preserved wall paintings, bear witness to its originally lavish appearance and significant sponsorship. On the other hand, the triconchal plan with the deep narthex of the Liti type, 4 subsidiary chapels and an open portico speaks so evidently in favor of its monastic function, as does the iconographic program in the narthex's lower zone, which features an extensive gallery of monastic saints. Thus, both hypotheses, by Papazotos and by Tansis, remain plausible. Let us turn to the architecture of the church's western part to see how they stand with these two interpretations. The narthex is a large open space room measuring 9.30 by 7.20 meters in the interior, designed by the use of 4 columns and thus consisting of 9 bays. This is a less common version of the Liti type, which usually features 2 columns and 6 bays. There are 3 entrances from the outside, the central one in the west wall and 2 piercing the north and south walls in the west corner bays. The west entrance is flanked on both sides by 2 single windows in the lower register and a triple window in the upper one. 3 more doors in the east wall provide access to the naus. The bays are covered by cross vaults, all but the 2 west corner bays, which are crowned by domes. Above the narthex there is another floor accommodated in a very unusual way over the 3 eastern bays. It is 2.40 meters wide and envisaged as a gallery overlooking the naus through a 3-lobed column-supported opening, trivilon, which takes the entire width of the naus. This catechumena of sorts is 3-bayed and also covered by cross vaults. Well lit through 3 triple windows on the west facade and offering an undisturbed view of the naus, it provides a privileged place for attending services in the church. The gallery is accessed through a single flight of narrow stairs built in the thickness of the narthex's south wall. Unlike some other parts of the church, such as the portico around the narthex and chapels, the narthex, including its upper floor, has been well preserved, except for the two corner domes, which were nevertheless evidenced by the form of what once were their lower parts. The appearance of the two domes is not as important as the mere fact that they once graced the west corner base of the large narthex. Both the Liti type of narthex and the twin domes motif are associated with the architecture of Katolika of Athonite monasteries. The two features appear together exactly in the late Byzantine Mount Athos, first in the Katolikon of the Hylander monastery, whose construction has been dated to the period between 1311 and 1316. There, the twin domes may have been a node of respect towards the appearance of the upper floor of the narthex in the Vatopedi monastery, the mother institution of Hylander. However, the two-column six-bayed narthex was something novel for Mount Athos. The term Liti, which is often used to describe this sort of deep narthex, even referring to the type, whether with 2 or 4 columns used as support, is in fact derived from the function, not the form of this room. Name comes from a homonymous supplication service, which is performed in the narthex on Mount Athos as a part of the old night vigil, Agrypnia, on the eves of Sundays and great feasts. As prescribed, the Agrypnia is to be attended by all members of the community, whether living on the monastery's premises or in the dependencies. Therefore, the number of people that have to be accommodated increases from that during the usual daily offices. Having in mind that the Liti service involves a procession, as well as that another segment of the Agrypnia, the diaklismos, a distribution of bread and wine, also takes place in the narthex. Its enlargement seems a natural answer to the demand. And exactly the inclusion of the Agrypnia into the monastic liturgical practice was part of a trend emerging at the turn of the 14th century, known as the Neo-Sabite reform, which can be associated with both the peninsula and later on the growing Hesychast movement. For a while, Hylander's Liti remained the sole product of this process on Mount Athos. Soon, the elements of the Neo-Sabite liturgical rule were codified by Patriarch Philotheos Kokinos, disciple of St. Gregory Palamas, while he was the abbot of Great Laver, 1344 to 1347, and then transplanted by Hesychast elders, the founders of several Athonite communities, becoming the universal service rule on the peninsula. In architecture, this is witnessed by Katolika, built or rebuilt in the second half of the 14th century and the first half of the 15th century. Let me present a brief survey. Agiou Panteleimonos, known also as Rossicon, experienced extensive rebuilding in the middle of the 14th century, thanks to donations of the Serbian Emperor Stefan Dusan, the new sovereign of the peninsula, who did this for Elder Isaiah, a Hesychast and previously a monk in Hylander, whom he installed as the abbot. A new Catholicon, refectories, storage rooms, chapels, and towers were built from the very foundations. The only information of the form of the Catholicon we get from descriptions and a drawing by Vasily Grigorovich Barsky, recorded on his second journey to Mount Athos in 1744. The church had 2 narthexes and a portico. The inner narthex measured 9 by 14 paces, roughly the ratio 2 to 3, and had 2 columns inside, which indicates that the narthex was a six-bay scheme, a familiar Liti layout. He neither mentions nor does his drawing show any dome over the narthex. The small monastery of Simonos Petras was given to despot John Uglješa, the Serbian ruler of Ceres, 1365 to 1371, by the governing Athonite assembly. He in turn provided sustenance for the monastery and put it under the leadership of monk Euthemius. Uglješa issued a charter for the monastery in 1363 and probably built a new church together with other key monastic structures. Barsky provided a description of the Catholicon he saw. It had 2 narthexes and the inner one had 2 columns. This points to the 6-bay layout, although the measures of 8 by 20 paces suggest an unproportionally narrow room, but he may have recorded them by mistake. There is little chance that Barsky was looking at the original 14th century church, which must have been rebuilt or at least restored by this time, since the monastery suffered from several fires, the major one being that of 1580. Nonetheless, it is possible that the form of this church followed that of the old one, or even incorporated as the present narthex is planned, and some architectural elements point to six-bay arrangement. Here maybe you can see, I don't have a pointer, but here you can see that the top of the narthex, there remains of the consoles that were supporting arches, and probably in the middle there were two columns. Barsky's drawing shows that there were two domes over the narthex, probably indicated two chapels on what appears to be an upper floor. Oops. I apologize. I keep touching two. Kutlumusio monastery, known from earlier times, was renewed under the abbacy of Hariton, 1355-6 to 1374, later the bishop of Ungrovallachia. The renovation was so substantial that it seems like the foundation of like the new foundation of an entirely new monastery. Hariton turned to the ruler of Wallachia for patronage, since after 1371 and the death of John Uglješa, he could not expect much of help from either Serbian lords or Byzantine noblemen. A study by Pandelis Fundas, based on the architectural and structural analysis of the present Catholicon, has shown that its construction should be connected with this period of renovation, 1370 to 1378. The form of the Liti almost exactly follows that of Hylander. 6 bays of approximately equal size, 2 domes over the corner bays, and the lack of an upper story. One also should note the presence of a portico around the Liti, as well as the tipikari on the east corners of the church, all very similar to those of the church of Prophet Elijah. Kastamonitu monastery was restored in 1433 by Veliki Čelnik Radić, a general and high dignitary at the Serbian court, after it was damaged in a fire. Radić later entered the monastery as monk Romanos. Barsky gives a description of the church, which had 2 narthexes. The inner narthex, which measured 10 by 12 paces, had two white marble columns, 2 domes, wall paintings, and stone-paved floor. Clearly, another Liti that, according to Barsky's drawing, had its 2 domes standing at some distance from the west wall of the naus. This indicates that they were positioned over the western corner base, echoing the form of Hylander's Liti. The whole church, with tipicaria and what looks like an ambulatory, once perhaps a portico, resembles that of Kutlumusio. Dionysiou monastery was founded by monk Dionysius on a rock within a piece of land that was given to him by Athonite authorities between 1356 and 1362. The monastery was built thanks to the patronage of Alexius III Komnenos, the emperor of Trebizond, based on its fully preserved wall paintings, which are dated to 1535-46. The Catholicon and its Liti are dated to the 16th century. However, it is possible that the church construction may have been part of the late 14th or early 15th century efforts in constituting the monastery. Interesting aspect of this church is that it features an upper floor with 2 dome chapels and the catechumenion set in between. These are reached from below by staircase built inside the narthex's south wall in the same way as in the church of Prophet Elijah. Turning back to the church of Prophet Elijah, it should be said that it exhibits a combination of architectural influences coming from Thessaloniki, Constantinople, and Mount Athos. The first ones, evident in the use of an open portico enveloping the narthex and ending with 2 chapels at the east, are understandable considering the church's location at the time and the time of its construction. The Constantinopolitan elements are represented by the building technique, perhaps witnessing to the employment of a workshop from the capital. Finally, the use of the complex Athonite plan, witnessing to its full development by the time of the church's construction, to design the building seems intentional. This clearly indicates a conscious choice and some sort of a strong relationship with Mount Athos and its monastic practices. Additionally, one can imagine that the spacious Liti in the prophet Elijah's could have occasionally been used to accommodate the lay people of the city in attendance of some festival or other special services in the church. The open portico, which protects a set of 4 proscenitaria icons painted in concave niches on the narthex's west facade, suggests that there was a religious relation with the church's front yard and perhaps with the inhabitants of the city and pilgrims. Apart from skillful architectural composition and rich building technique, the church takes advantage of an imposing location, overlooking the Basilica of St. Demetrius and major part of the city, where once a palace stood. Such a combination is not surprising when viewed against its most likely sponsorship. Whichever of the two Byzantine identifications of the church embraced, it seems that Empress Anna of Savoy was its commissioner. She needed to fully establish herself in the city, claim the imperial status for herself and her son John V, and connect with the Hesychast movement and Athonite monasticism as its base. Anna's later Anastasia's support for the Hesychasts and the appreciation she achieved on Mount Athos after her death are documented. The gallery above the narthex, the Catechumena, the only such feature in the Palaiologan architecture of Thessaloniki and likewise almost absent in contemporary Athonite Catholica, can be explained through the imperial and female sponsorship of and presence in the church. The gallery's large trivellon, which affords the privileged view of the entire naos, Tansis sees as a Constantinopolitan element and an expression of the important female patronage. He calls to attention the examples of the Church of Christ Pantipoptes and its Ctitorisa and resident Anna Dalasini, the mother of Emperor Alexius I, and the complex of churches of Pantocrator Monastery and its initial foundress, Empress Irene, the wife of John II Komnenos. From the Palaiologan period, he points to the additions to the Lips Monastery and Theotokos Perivleptos by Empress Theodora Palaiologina and the widow of Michael Doukas Glavas Tarchaniotis, respectively. One should not forget that the Athonite monasteries of Middle Byzantine period also feature catechumena, with openings towards the naos, although their use by resident monks is somewhat different, as I have shown elsewhere, but still reflects the rites of the Ctitor. As this architectural feature is mostly missing in Athonite Catholica built in the late Byzantine period, I agree that it came from Constantinople. However, the way the entrance to the gallery was provided, directly from the ground floor, not from outside of the church, which is a rule, particularly in the Middle Byzantine period, might be an indication of the church being meant for a female monastic community, thus providing a further argument for the identification of the church with the convent of Agia Anargiri. On the other hand, if the identification with the monastery of Akapni once gets confirmed, we could say that this uncommon solution resulted either from the lack of a building conveniently close enough to the church to provide the direct access to the catechumena, or from relaxed attitudes towards the avaton. By the way of conclusion, I wish to pose some questions. Why the Athonite church plan was brought to Thessaloniki? Was the church built for the community which practiced the liturgical pattern of the contemporary Athonite monastery, that is the Neo-Sabite typikon? Or perhaps according to wishes or plans of the Ctitorisa, Empress Anna Palaiologina, to establish a community of hesychasts who favored this rule and thus gained their further support? If the church was indeed the Catholicon of the monastery of the Agia Anargiri, this would be the only known church of the Athonite type built for a female community, which, judging by the size of the building, was rather numerous. Are we aware of such a community in the city or, interestingly, anywhere else? In the view of these aspects, I would be a little more in favor of Papazotos's hypothesis. We have heard the monastery of Kapniu being mentioned several times in the past few days' presentations. What do we know about it? What was its organization? Who were its monks? And what were their connections with Mount Athos? Here I need your help. Therefore, I welcome and look forward to your answers, comments, additional information, views, and help towards better understanding of this Church of Thessaloniki's late Byzantine monasteries, found on what seems to be the synthesis of Constantinopolitan and Athonite influences, the imperial and Hesychast agendas. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nebojša, for the presentation and for your questions. Now we have to answer them. It's not easy at all. Λοιπόν, υπάρχουν σχόλια ή ερωτήσεις προς τον κύριο Στάνκοβιτς στα ελληνικά ή στα αγγλικά? Yes, Professor Semoglu, please.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ για την ανακοίνωση. Καταλαβαίνετε. Ωραία. Καταρχάς, η σχέση με το ησυχαστικό περιβάλλον προκύπτει και από εικονογραφικά θέματα, από το πρόγραμμα μέσα. Η απεικόνιση του ζεύγους Βαρλάμιου Άσαφ στην νότιο-δυτική πλευρά είναι, νομίζω, ενδεικτική. Τώρα, όσον αφορά την κτητόρισα, την Άννα της Αβοΐας Παλαιολογίνας, εγώ έχω πιστεί και από την υπόθεση του Τάντσι που έχει κάνει, κυρίως με βάση την απεικόνιση, την σπάνια απεικόνιση της Αγίας Άννας, η οποία είναι ως Άννα of Tenderness, δηλαδή, πώς να το πούμε, ελεούσα, Άννα ελεούσα, η οποία βρίσκεται στο αψίδωμα το εξωτερικό και που συνδυάζεται με τον Χριστό από την άλλη πλευρά. Δηλαδή, είναι εξαιρετικά περίεργη η απεικόνιση της Άννας, αν δεν ειδωθεί σε σχέση με την κτητόρισα της Άννας Παλαιολογίνας, κατά την άποψή μου.
Yeah, I can fully agree. I think Anna should be seen as a κτητόρισα of the building. I'm still wondering whether it should be associated with the Agian Argiri monastery or with the Kapniu. That's and as I already presented, the way the staircase or the entrance to the gallery was provided directly from the church maybe points to the female use of the lower of the ground floor of the church as well. Because I'm not aware of other solutions like this in previous and this period of Byzantine architecture. But still, we might witness also some change. And, as I pointed, this is a rather large church. Was it meant for some large community? Or maybe it doubled as both monastic and palatial church, residential church of Anna. Thank you.
As for the staircase, we have an exact copy of St. Elias in Stomion in Zayis.
Yes.
Exact copy, which the date of this church. Bohr says that it is early 16th century, and I believe so, and Messis said that is Byzantine. So, open questions.
Yeah, I think you probably can better help with this monument. I think, it could be dating from the same period or a little later. Definitely, it's surprisingly so how similar it is with the church in Thessaloniki. Is it a copy or is it, just?
But with some Ottoman elements in details, so we have to take care. Okay. Υπάρχουν άλλες. Παρακαλώ, κύριε Παϊσίδου. Καθηγητή, κύριε Παϊσίδου.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ για τη συνθετική εισήγηση. Αναφορικά με την Ακαπνίου, επειδή νομίζω ήδη το θέσατε το θέμα σε σχέση με αυτό που υποστήριξε ο κύριος Μέντζος πολύ πρόσφατα, πιστεύω ότι ήταν ένα μεγάλο μοναστήρι στο κέντρο της Θεσσαλονίκης, χαμηλά, δεν έχει καμία σχέση με την Άνω Πόλη και ίσως το γεγονός ότι ο προφήτης Ηλίας ήταν ένα εξνόβο σε εκείνη τη θέση μοναστηριακό καθίδρυμα, υποστηρίζεται ακόμα περισσότερο και από τις ανασκαφές που διεξήγαγε η 9η εφορία Βυζαντινών αρχαιοτήτων προ 2 δεκαετιών σχεδόν, όπου τα προσκτίσματα που βγήκαν στην επιφάνεια δεν δείχνουν κάτι τέτοιο. Δεν μπορούν να πάνε τόσο πίσω όσο η ίδρυση της Μονής Ακαπνίου. Σε σχέση με την Άννα την Παλαιολογίνα, και εγώ πείθομαι, είτε με την άποψη που προβάλλει ο Παπαζώτος, βέβαια όχι ως Ακαπνίου, είτε με την άποψη Τάντζη. Αυτό που είπε ο κύριος Έμογλου σαφώς είναι ισχυρότατο επιχείρημα. Η Αγία Άννα βρεφοκρατούσα με την Παναγία στην αγκαλιά της, και επιπλέον έχουμε και μία άλλη μαριολογική παράσταση, την ίδια την Παναγία ένθρονη βρεφοκρατούσα, δίπλα στο διπλανό του αψίδωμα, δηλαδή δείχνει ότι υπάρχει κάτι που έχει σχέση με τη λατρεία της Θεοτόκου. Για τους Αγίους Αναργύρους δεν πείθομαι, γιατί τουλάχιστον από τα σωζόμενα δεν υπάρχει η ελάχιστη εικονογραφική μαρτυρία. Αλλά το ότι πρέπει να είναι της Άννας, ναι, νομίζω και εγώ ότι προς τα εκεί θα πρέπει να κλείνουμε, και σας ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ που ενισχύετε αυτή την άποψη. Ευχαριστώ.
Εγώ ευχαριστώ.
Ναι. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Έχω να πω μερικές σκέψεις σε αυτό πάνω που είπε ο κύριος Σέμογλου σχετικά με την Άννα, την Αγία Άννα. Είναι πολύ ενδιαφέρον το ότι στη συγκεκριμένη παράσταση η Αγία Άννα φοράει ένα λευκό κάλυμα της κεφαλής, κάτι που το βρίσκουμε πάρα πολύ συχνά στα έργα του Τζιώτο και των άλλων των καλλιτεχνών της Χιένας. Δηλαδή είναι ένα κόσμημα, ένα πέπλο, το λευκό πέπλο, είναι χαρακτηριστικό των κυριών των Ιταλικών αυλών, των αυλών της Ευρώπης. Οπότε το να το φοράει η Αγία Άννα σαν κυρία της Δυτικής Ευρώπης κάτι δείχνει στη σχέση της με την Άννα της Σαβοίας, ας πούμε. Επίσης να πω για τη Λιτή που αναφέρεται και το μεγάλο μέγεθος, δεν ξέρω αν δηλώνει το ότι μπορεί να συμμετείχαν και λαϊκοί άνθρωποι στη λατρεία μιας μονής, και αυτό είναι πολύ ενδιαφέρον, γιατί κανείς δεν μας έχει πει ποτέ εάν στις τόσες πολλές μονές της Θεσσαλονίκης εκκλησιάζονται και λαϊκοί ή όχι. Φτάνουν δηλαδή οι 4 καθολικοί ναοί για τους λαϊκούς ανθρώπους της πόλης, δεν ξέρουμε. Είναι ένα πολύ ωραίο θέμα προς διερεύνηση, αλλά έχουμε να παρατηρήσουμε ότι στα καθολικά, από τα μεταβυζαντινά καθολικά και μετά των μονών, οι λιτές διευρύνονται πάρα πολύ, γιατί στα τυπικά των μονών που συνδέονται με τους κτήτορες, περνάει η παράδοση να διαβάζεται η κηδεία των μοναχών στη Λιτή. Οπότε έχουμε έναν νεκρό μοναχό που πρέπει να ξαπλώσει, έτσι, και να μαζευτούν γύρω-γύρω και να αναγνωστεί η εξώδιος ακολουθία. Και να γίνονται όλες αυτές οι παραδοσιακές λειτουργίες, το μεσονικτικό και όλες οι ακολουθίες που έχουν σχέση με τους κτήτορες στη Λιτή. Οπότε χρειάζεται χώρος. Ευχαριστώ.
Κύριε Σέμογλου, μια τελευταία ερώτηση, γιατί πρέπει να ξεπεράσουμε τον χρόνο. Είναι...
Can I just briefly reply? I like your connection with the West. Maybe Anna of Savoy also was kind of showing, you know, I mean, not only her knowledge, but also further associating herself through this representation. And of course, the point on the services, there are many more other services that I didn't have time to explain all of them, but yes, they also take place, especially the funeral, but other things. And definitely, I'm also inclined, as you said, to see the narthex area as only reserved for monastics. But here is, as I said, like it's opens the questions why it's so big. Can we, do we know a female community that was such a large? Was it meant only for them, or maybe also for some royal rituals? You know, the entrances of the empress and her retinue. Yeah, I don't know.
Νομίζω. Θα ήθελα να εκφράσω την πλήρη αντίθεσή μου με τη σύνδεση αυτού του ναού, του προφήτη Ηλία, με την Παλαιολογίνα την Άννα. Το αρχιτεκτόνημα δεν μπορεί να χρονολογηθεί με βάση τα αρχιτεκτονικά του στοιχεία πριν από τα τέλη του 14ου και τις αρχές του 15ου. Μάλλον είναι το τελευταίο από τα βυζαντινά μνημεία που έχουμε στην πόλη, πριν την κατάκτησή της, πριν την άλωσή της από τους Τούρκους. Τα αρχιτεκτονικά στοιχεία με τίποτα δεν πηγαίνουν στα μέσα του 14ου.
Μέσα 1360, 70.
Μέσα. Για να, τότε είναι.
Να πω κάτι τελευταίο, συγγνώμη. Ο αστικός χαρακτήρας της Λιτής, και όχι μόνο ο μοναστικός, νομίζω ότι θα πρέπει να υποστηριχθεί. Φαίνεται πάρα πολύ καθαρά, γιατί στα δύο προβεβλημένα ανατολικά, πώς το πούμε, αψιδώματα, έχουμε στη μία πλευρά την νότια, την απεικόνιση του πλήθους, των θαυμάτων του πλήθους, αν θυμάστε, τα μοίρακλες, ας πούμε, και από την άλλη πλευρά πάλι είναι ένα αστικό, μια αστική απεικόνιση της βρεφοκτονίας. Δηλαδή, απουσιάζει οποιαδήποτε, και είναι ενδιαφέρον αυτό, μοναστικού τύπου παράσταση στα δύο πιο προβεβλημένα ανατολικά μέρη της Λιτής. Άρα, νομίζω αυτό που λέτε, ότι μπορεί να έχει έναν χαρακτήρα και για την πόλη, δηλαδή, έχει ενδιαφέρον. Δηλαδή, εμένα με προβληματίζει. Ευχαριστώ. Thanks.
I agree with you, but I also don't have much experience with the city monastery, so this is the first one I'm encountering, so I'm just wondering.
Είχε γράψει κάτι η κυρία Παϊσίδου για τα αστικά μοναστήρια, με αφορμή βέβαια κάποιο τη Χαλκαία. Να έχει ενδιαφέρον αυτό. Ναι. Ευχαριστώ.
Ναι, ο κύριος Μυρλής, και να κλείσουμε, γιατί έχουμε ξεπεράσει κατά 5 λεπτά το χρόνο. Λυπάμαι, εγώ λυπάμαι πιο πολύ από όλους, μάλλον, που αυτή η κουβέντα.
Είμαι πολύ σύντομος και φυσικά ούτε είμαι ειδικός των εκκλησιών της Θεσσαλονίκης, ούτε της αρχιτεκτονικής. Εκείνο που έχω να πω είναι ότι αυτός ο ναός, πέρασα χτες μάλιστα, είναι πάρα πολύ επιβλητικός και μεγάλος και εντυπωσιάζομαι πάρα πολύ αν είναι όντως μετά τα μέσα του 14ου. Σας πιστεύω, δεν λέω κάτι τέτοιο, αλλά αν είναι όντως εκείνης εποχής, η Θεσσαλονίκη βρίσκεται σε παρατεταμένη οικονομική κρίση βαθύτατη από τη δεκαετία του 40 και δεν αναρρώνει παρά, δεν ξέρω πότε, το τέλη του 15ου. Και πότε είναι Οθωμανική βέβαια. Άρα πρέπει να σκεφτούμε, δηλαδή πρέπει να πάμε πολύ ψηλά, κάποιος να έχει τα μέσα, και άρα ταιριάζει από αυτήν την άποψη τέλεια με την Άννα που θέλει να δείξει και ότι είναι η αυτοκράτηρα. Αυτό μόνο έχω να πω.
Ευχαριστώ.
Λοιπόν, νομίζω ότι θα κλείσουμε αυτή την κουβέντα. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Λοιπόν,